Here we are at home, daily Bible readings. Remember, this series is for the quarter is for wisdom. Our lesson today is work for the good of all, Galatians 1 through 10. Work for the good of all. We're at June 8th, Sunday School. So this lesson starts out talking about if a brother be overtaken in a fault. Then we should, that are spiritual, should restore them in the spirit of weakness. So now we're talking wisdom. Restore them in the spirit of weakness, considering yourself, lest you be tempted. And then it says, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. So this lesson basically tells us how we are to behave or act with one another. In acting with one another, if a person is overtaken in a fault, now we have to go in the spirit of weakness. And that fault can be anything. That fault can refer to anything. When you see a brother not following after the righteousness of God. So we're talking about the righteousness of God. We're talking about following after the righteousness of God. We're talking about being the righteousness of God. We're talking about acting like the righteousness of God. So if you see a brother overtaken in a fault, then we should restore that brother in the spirit of meekness, lest you yourself be tempted in that same thing. And then it says, bear one another's burdens, so that we can fulfill the law of Christ. And the law of Christ, mostly 99.89% talks about love. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart. All of that, the first three scriptures. And then the next one says, love your neighbor as yourself. That's the reason you don't kill. That's the reason you don't steal. That's the reason you don't lie. That's the reason you don't do all of those things, because you love your neighbor as yourself, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Then it talks about, in verse 3, if a man think himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. The secret to that is that we are all nothing. We are dust. We are going to return to the dust of the earth. Okay? So it says, but let every man prove his own work, and he shall be rejoicing. He shall have rejoicing in himself alone and not another. So that means you do your own work. You follow the path of Christ. You do something. So don't rejoice on the others. Don't try to take credit for something that you did not do. And so there we are. For every man shall bear his own burdens. If we go to Romans, the 12th chapter, and the 3rd verse, we see that scripture that says, he's given grace to every one of us, and we ought not think more highly of ourselves than we ought to think. But we ought to think soberly. That's walking in that wisdom. We ought to think soberly, according to how God has dealt with us for a measure of faith. Don't think you're better than this person. Don't think you're more than that person. But you run your own race knowing who you are. So this is not about everybody else. This is not about what everybody else is doing. This is about you running your own race in God. Let him that is taught in the word communicate unto him that teacheth in all good things. So if you're taught in the word and you understand the word and you know the word, communicate unto somebody else that's teaching the word. Let them know that, hey, you're running this race, I'm running this race, let's talk together. One of my favorite scriptures that I brought my kids up on is verse 7, says, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And I use that in a lot of occasions with my kids, saying, be not deceived, God is not mocked, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. If you sow into your life the study of the word, you are going to reap the word. The word is going to come alive in you if you study the word. So whatever you sow, that's what you're going to reap. And so I use that as my example for my kids all the time, letting them know it doesn't matter if you do good, if you do bad. If you do good, you're going to reap good. If you do bad, you're going to reap bad. You're going to reap whatever it is you sow, no matter what you sow. If you sow apples, they'll come up. If you sow oranges, it'll come up. If you sow onions, it'll come up. So whatever you sow in this life, that's what you're going to reap. And this refers to let a man do his own work, rejoicing in the Lord. Then you shall have rejoice in himself alone and not in another when that fruit comes up. When the fruit of whatever you've sown comes up, you did it and you will get that fruit from that thing. And let us not be weary in well-doing. Verse 8, For he that soweth to the flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap everlasting life. So whatever you sow, you're going to reap. God is not going to be mocked. God is not going to change his mind. If you sow to the flesh, you are going to reap the things of the flesh. If you sow to the Spirit, you are going to reap, the scripture said, everlasting life, life everlasting. And don't be weary in well-doing. It gets hard sometimes. Sometimes it gets really hard. But be not weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not. If I plant an apple tree today, if I plant apple seeds today, I cannot get weary because I don't have apples in 2 weeks, in a month, in a year, in 5 years, maybe 5 years. I can't be weary for doing the right thing. I can't be weary for praying. I can't get weary of reading the scriptures. I can't get weary of restoring brothers and sisters in the Lord. I can't be weary for bearing one another's burdens. I can't get weary in those kinds of things. As we have therefore opportunity comes every day because you open your eyes. As we have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially to them of the household of faith. So now we're not only doing it for the household of faith, but we're doing it to all men. We are sharing that love. And it's all in ministry. It is ministry to witness. It is ministry to restore such a one who has lost faith. It is ministry to bear one another's burdens. It is ministry. And that's what this is all about. So the wisdom of this, of the scripture, is that we ought to bear the infirmities of those that are weak. The whole deal is that we should work for the good of all, not just about myself. Yes, I'm going to do some things. Yes, I'm going to minister, but it's just not about just me, not about my family and no more, not about my household of faith, but the scripture says do good to all men and especially to the household of faith. So yes, we're doing good for the household of faith. So God bless you. Thank you so much for tuning in on Tuesday. Monday, work for the good of all, Galatians 6, 1 through 10. God bless.